And moving on, Iran. This week, the European Union backed down from designating the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, as a terrorist organization, opting instead to sanction a few dozen officials. This despite its clear involvement in terror activities in Ukraine and around the world, and even against its own people. Joining us now to discuss is Emily Schrader, senior correspondent for YNET. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Emily, what is behind the decision not to add the IRGC to the terror list?
Well, I think that overall we've seen a long history, several decades worth of weakness when it comes to dealing with the Islamic regime from Europe. That tradition has unfortunately continued through the previous Iran deal and through the Iran talks that they're continuing to speak about now. Just the other day, we saw Joseph Borrell came out saying that he thought designating the IRGC as a terrorist organization would actually harm efforts to reinstate or renegotiate the JCPOA, the Iran deal. Why this is outrageous is because we shouldn't even be discussing reinstating the Iran deal. Nobody should be negotiating with the Islamic regime right now. They should be saying that they support the protesters in their pursuit of regime change and getting rid of the Islamic regime for good. It's not good for the people of Iran. It's certainly not good for the people of the Middle East, and it's not good for the people of Europe or anywhere else in the world either.
And now the European Union, under Joseph Borrell, deciding not to go ahead with this, but the European Parliament and many Iranians themselves, of course, calling to add the IRGC to the terror list?
Yeah, so the sentiments on the ground in Iran and in the Iranian diaspora as well are very consensus on this issue. Everybody wants the IRGC recognized as a terrorist organization because that is exactly how they've behaved for the last 44 years under this current regime. Additionally, there are a lot of elected officials, including in Europe. We saw the non-binding European Parliament resolution stating that the IRGC is a terrorist organization. That's a great first step. It's not enough. More should be done. The EU, all of the EU, and really every nation in the world should be recognizing the IRGC as a terrorist organization. And as I said, we need these world leaders to step up and say that they support the people of Iran who are pursuing regime change. This is enough. It's been going on for 44 years. It's only gotten worse, and it's only going to get worse the more leeway we give Iran. This is a mafia regime that's controlling the country. There is nothing to be gained by negotiating with them, and we need to take a very tough zero-tolerance policy towards Iran, whether it be on the nuclear deal or their export of terrorism or their gross human rights violations.
And so what can you tell us now about the ongoing protests in Iran? You've been tracking the arrests and the executions. Are they deterring the protests going on in the country?
So I think that these arrests and, of course, the executions are absolutely not deterring the protests. If anything, they're doing the opposite. What we see in this round of protests that we haven't seen previously in previous years is that this isn't an issue of economics. It isn't an issue of, only women's rights. This is an issue of a unilateral rejection from the people of Iran, be they Persian descent or Ahwazi or other Kurdish minorities. We see minorities who are rising up against the Islamic regime that have never spoken out against the regime before. So there is a unity in this call to action, and there is a very clear message that they want an end to this regime. Now, these protests have continued for over 100 days. They're still continuing, and this is despite the fact that the regime has been not only using lethal force against protesters, including gross, sexual abuse against girls who are protesting, but they have also cut off the internet in multiple cities and multiple times throughout this process. Whenever we see a huge push for protests, we see a direct relation to the regime cutting off internet in those cities. So it's very concerning what's happening, but despite that, we still see that there are protests ongoing, and they show no signs of stopping.
So that's within Iran, and I'm curious to ask about the support that you're seeing outside of Iran for the protests happening inside the country, of which you yourself have been a major voice.
Yeah, on the ground in Israel, I think that there is obviously a consensus against the regime in Iran. But additionally, we see that there are a lot of Israelis who are showing support for the people of Iran against this regime because we share a common enemy, ironically, which is the Islamic regime, who is funding terrorist organizations in the Gaza Strip with Hamas and Islamic Jihad, with Hezbollah in Lebanon and in Syria. And of course, the Iranian people are also suffering at the hands of this terrorist regime via the IRGC or the other security forces such as the morality police, even within the country. So for the first time, we're seeing, even on social media, that there's a huge alliance being formed between the people of Israel and the people of Iran. And I really hope that that continues.
We hope so too. All right, Emily Schrader, thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you.